Hi, I'm Ed Parcaut, your host of Inner Edison. What I want you to take away from today's show is our greatest growth comes from our greatest failures. Today's guest is Brian Smith, and he's been through a couple of those. So let's have him tell his story and his journey along the way. And thanks for being on today, Brian.
Hey, my pleasure, Ed.
So a lot of my listeners don't know who a Brian Smith is because there got to be a lot of Brian Smiths out there. But
Yes.
you're the one, right? But you're the one who brought UGG to America.
That's right.
Right. So you want to kind of give your background and your story, because I know your story, but my listeners aren't going to know your story. So if you want to give your background and your story, and then you can tell us what you learned from that journey.
Sure. Well, I was a chartered accountant, which is like a CPA. Mm-hmm. And I was working all day and studying at night. It took me 10 years to graduate. And I quit the day I graduated because I hated accounting. And I was sort of, cruising around Perth in Western Australia for a couple of weeks, trying to figure out what I'm going to do, but not really putting a lot of effort into it. And then one afternoon I was driving home and I heard the words of this song, which comes from my favorite album, and it was the second song of Dark Side of the Moon. And the words were, and then one day you find 10 years have got behind you. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun. And as soon as I heard those words, I just got goosebumps all over me. And I thought about all my friends who were tracking off to partnerships and other friends who'd started businesses out of high school. And I felt like I'd been running on the spot for 10 years. And back then I just discovered meditation, through yoga. And I was meditating one morning and I'm trying to think, what can I do? And suddenly I got these goosebumps again. And I thought, oh my God, all the big trends are coming out of California, like Levi jeans and waterbeds and, the surf brands and all that. And I thought, I'm going to go to California and find the next big thing and bring it back to Australia. So like within 2 weeks, I arrived at Los Angeles and I had my surfboard and my, suitcase, and I immediately rented a little house up in Santa Monica. And the first thing I did was, get my surfboard in the truck and head up to Malibu, because I dreamed of surfing Malibu all my life, as like most Australians are all surfers, And so I spent a couple of months just hanging out on the beach there, getting to know everybody on the Malibu set, and no big thing, and a couple more months, I still hadn't found the next big thing. And it was now like October and the wind had got really chilly and the water was getting cold. And I remember coming out of a surf and I was pulling on the sheepskin boots that I'd brought from Australia. And it just struck me, oh shit, there's no sheepskin boots, no UGG boots in America. And so I looked at my buddy Doug and said, man, we got to go in business, man. We're going to be instant millionaires. And you know how that's when you're an entrepreneur, the aha is like, oh my God, it's going to be fantastic. So we got back to my house and we did a little research and called up a manufacturer in Perth, Western Australia, a guy called George Bircher, and we talked him into letting us be the distributor. So we scraped together $500 and sent it down to him and got 6 pairs of samples in. And, they arrived and Doug was going to be the salesman. I was terrified of sales, as an accountant. And he came back after a week with the samples and no orders. He had an envelope with about 150 business cards from all the shoe retailers. And he said, Brian, they tell us we're crazy trying to sell sheepskin in California. And that's sort of logical, in American terms, but I knew that Australia's climate is identical to California. And so that wasn't the real reason. And so, as an entrepreneur, you have to, every time you hit a wall, you have to figure out a way to get over it or around or under or whatever. And I started thinking, well, how come all my friends up at Malibu think this is the best idea in the world? And it struck me and Doug that, oh my God, that so many of them had been to Australia on their surf trips and they'd bought 4 or 5 pairs of boots back for their buddies. So within the surf community, UGG was a pretty big deal. And so we pivoted and said, okay, let's go after the surf shop. So, Doug really wanted me to go on the road this time. So I started off in Santa Monica, and I remember driving down to the first surf shop, Con Surfboards, and I and I was terrified. I walked in with my little bag of samples, and I opened it up, and the owner goes, "Hey, what are Ugg boots? What are you doing with those? They're fantastic." And I said, "Well, I'm thinking about importing them into America." "Oh my God, you're going to make a fortune. Those things are the best. All my friends have got them, you know." So I walked out of that shop thinking, well, sales isn't that bad, you know. And went to the next store. "Oh my God, they're fantastic. Yeah, I've got a pair. My buddies bought them for me. You're going to make a fortune." And so I ended up, you know, meeting up with Doug, and we just, you know, agreed that, man, we got to go into business. You know, how do we get some product? And you know that saying that's once you start out on a path, the universe will conspire to work with you. Mm-hmm. That's a very ancient saying, and my roommate overheard me talking to Doug, and he said, "Hey, there's some guys in my office that are looking for investments." And so he introduced us, and just like that, without a business plan or anything, we raised 20 grand, which in today's money is about 75 grand. And so we sent 15 down to Australia to George and ordered 500 pairs. And this was the beginning of our millionaire, you know, business. So,
Brian, I just want to interject. You keep saying UGG, but at that time, that's not a registered name for your company, right?
No, it wasn't. In fact, in Australia, everyone referred to sheepskin boots as UGG boots, and it was spelled all different ways, UG, UGH, and everything. And when I decided to go into business, I registered the UGG mark in America because nobody else had done it. And with American law, if you get the first in and you can maintain, you know, your business, then you always own the trademark. So that was that's a really good point to bring up, because that was the underpinning of the entire UGG business. So anyway, we packed up, you know, sorted all these boots out, 500 pairs in the third bedroom of my house there in Santa Monica. And we loaded up our cars and with, you know, big duffel bags full of product. And we went back out on the road again. And I remember driving down to Con Surfboards, and I say, "Okay, Jim, yeah, how many?" I opened up the bag. I said, "How many do you want?" You know? And he goes, "Oh, Brian, well done, man. But we couldn't sell them out at our store. We just sell surfboards and trunks and flip-flops. But don't worry, you're going to do fantastic with the shoe stores." And I started going, "Oh, shit." You know, and I went to the next store. "Oh, well done, Brian, but we sell surfboards and trunks and bikinis, and, you know, we could never sell them out, but you're going to do great in the shoe stores." And this happened all the way down the coast, all the way down to Mexico, and Doug was doing the San Fernando Valley, and he got the same response. So we got back and totaled up all of the orders that we did get for the first year's sales of UGG, and it was 28 pairs, exactly $1,000.
Right. What year was this?
That was 1979.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's 41 years ago, 42 years ago. And, oh, shit, that was so disappointing, you know, because we'd seen ourselves as having this roller coaster business, and it was just almost dead in the water. And it was really disappointing. But, you know, years later, after I ended up selling the business, I wrote a book, and it's called, I'll just hold it up here. It's called The Birth of a Brand. There we go.
Yeah. I actually have your book. I got it when I got back.
Excellent. Yeah. And it's like the story of building UGG from the very beginning all the way through to the time I sold it 18 years later. And the theme of the book is that I learned over all these years of building businesses that you can't give birth to adults. So that's the theme of my book. So every business, you know, if you look at the Wall Street Journal Stock Exchange page, every single one of those companies had to start with $1,000 or less, or maybe a little bit more, right? For the starting out. And that's just the way it goes. You have the aha moment, which is the conception. The first action is the birth. So me buying 6 pairs of samples was the birth of UGG. And then this thing just lies there. It's in its every business goes into the infancy stage, and it just lies there and it lies there. And you got to keep feeding it and changing the diapers, you know. And every now and again you'll get a little giggle. But if you can last through that period, which could be a couple of months to a year or more, you'll start to get the toddling phase. And that's pretty cool because, you know, the first true believers are buying your product and magazines are writing articles about you. And that eventually goes then into the youth stage, which is, like I call it, the best phase of every business, where you've got consistent orders coming in, the accounting and administration is working, the shipping and receiving and customer service is all working. And you can run a $20, $25 million business in that period. And, eventually then, it gets in. If it's a really good product or service, you'll hit the teenage years. And do you remember when you're a teenager, you want to be in every party in town on Saturday night, Well, it's the same thing in business. You want to be in every major trade show and every mass retailer. And it's like a recipe for death if you go too big, too fast. And so you have to sort of get the controls in to make it a mature company. So that became the theme of the book. And it really helps a lot of people who are starting out understand that, oh, my God, I'm not a failure. I just am going through this infancy,
Right, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs think it should happen much faster than it does. Because back to, in your story, when you're talking about when you have that 500 pairs, right, and you're trying to get them sold, right, and you can't get them sold, so you basically, I listened to you and I read your book again, so I do know your story, right? That's cool. So what you did is you're like, there's something else I can do. So basically you didn't give up. And that's what a lot of, Inner Edison, greatest accomplishment, greatest defeats. But also Edison said, most people quit right before they become successful.
That's so true. And I wanted to quit. I mean, I thought this is a disaster, but number one, I knew that 1 in 2 Australians had some sort of sheepskin footwear. So it wasn't the product that was bad. Right, it was something that was missing here in the US, and so Doug went and got another job, and I couldn't go out of business because I still had 480 pairs in the third bedroom. All my investors' money tied up. So I finished out, January, February, March, going up to Malibu, and I was doing street fairs and swap meets, and the best thing I did was every time I went surfing at Malibu every day, I would open up the back of the van, and I had 50 or 100 pairs of boots in the van, and that became like a little retail store. And after a while, the word got out, and people would be coming every day, to buy Ugg boots. And so we did about $5,000 that rest of that season. So I got a job, for the summer scraping boats underwater at Marina Del Rey, and then in August, September, I thought, okay, I'm going to do some advertising. So I hired two models, a guy and a girl, and we posed them on the beach down at Wyndham Sea in La Jolla, and the perfect hair and the perfect clothing and the perfect sunset, and we ran those ads in the Surfer magazine and Action Sports magazines, and the sales that season went to about 10,000, and I was going, wow, what's wrong? It should be way more than this. So I got another summer job, and this one was construction in Bel Air for 4 or 5 months. And then, August came around. So I said, okay, I'm going to hire better looking models and a more expensive photographer. Right. So we got them and posed them again on the beach at Wyndham Sea with the perfect hair. And, the ad was the page was this big, and the boots were like this big, like major emphasis on the boots, and we ran them, and the sales that season went to like about $20,000. And I just couldn't figure it out. And my next summer job was working as a greenskeeper on a golf course here in San Diego, which I loved. But, during that summer, I decided, okay, I'm just going to quit this, get rid of the inventory I have, and just close it down. And then, like in October, the first big storm came through and hit the coast, which it does every year around about October. And I got home just totally soaked, and I listened to my answering machine. There's like 20 messages from all my surf shop retailers screaming, hey, Brian, we need product immediately. Everybody's been coming in the store today, and they want Ugg boots, and how can we, So I basically couldn't get out of business, So they all drove down to my little warehouse and picked up their boots and went back. And so I decided, okay, well, shit, I'm going to have to try and figure out how to, get people to understand this product. And I had a beer with one of my surf shop owners in Ocean Beach here, and Robbie, and I said, Rob, I don't know what the hell's going wrong with my advertising. He just said, shut up, Brian. And he calls out the back to these little, 12, 13-year-old grommets, and they came out, and Rob says, "Hey, you guys, what do you think of Uggs?" And every one of them just went, "Oh man, those Uggs, they're so fake. Have you seen those ads? Those models, they can't surf." And like instantly I realized that I've been sending the wrong message to my target market. And I mean, looking at the ads, I was almost embarrassed at how bad they were. And so, lateral thinking, as every entrepreneur has to do, I went back and called up a buddy of mine who was running a Scholastic surf, circuit. And I said, "Hey, Pete, do you have any young kids who are going to turn pro soon? Because I need, I can't pay them much." But so he gave me two guys, Mike Parsons and Ted Robinson. And instead of getting a photographer, I just took my little Canon Sure Shot. We went surfing down at Trestles, which is in San Onofre, and we went to Black's Beach in La Jolla. You probably know both of those spots.
I totally do.
Yeah, and they're like iconic. It's a mile to get to the beach in both instances, and fantastic surf when you get there. And so I just took a couple of photos of these guys walking back from, along the road. And I ran them in October, November, and December this year. And the sales went to $220,000.
Wow.
Why? Because I'd finally matched the image of what I had with the readers and what they wanted. I could imagine every little kid in America who read Surfer Magazine would just die to be walking down the path with Mike Parsons and Ted Robinson, And so that was really the beginning of me understanding advertising and marketing and putting out an image that I learned that you never advertise your product, right? If you looked at the ads, that did work, the magazine, let me get my fingers right here. The magazine page was that big. The Ugg boots were almost invisible, and yet the ad worked, right? Because I was able to portray the image and the feeling. And so if you have a business with a product or even a service, like if you're a software developer that's got a time-saving program, right? You don't advertise a photo of your software. You have some guy in the Bahamas drinking a rum drink and using up all the time that he's saving from the software. So you got to switch it from the product to the benefit and the features. And if the more emotional you can get the reader to feel that they want to be in that photograph, then the better the ad's going to be. So, but that like 2 or 3 year period sort of made me understand that, and again, this is in my book, and the book's full of philosophy. It's not like a business book, and it's more of a personal life book with all the challenges and how I overcame them. And the theme I pulled out from that first couple of years was that the quickest way for a tadpole to become a frog is to live every day happily as a tadpole, Right. And that sounds really trite, but, every time I come back a year later to some group, they are, "Oh, you're the tadpole guy." They always remember that, because the quickest way for a tadpole to become a frog is just do what you're doing every day happily, and eventually shit will happen and you'll start to grow, and you look back and you got legs and no tail. So that was a really good learning lesson from that 3 or 4 year growth period.
Yeah, it sounds to me, because most, like you're saying, make sure the message you want to portray is hitting the audience you want to hit properly, right? And you're saying the emotional, which is huge. They're trying to do that more today than any other time. Everything's about emotional and connecting. Yeah,
it's pretty much always been that way. But yeah, you're right. The online advertising now is starting to figure that out.
Right. So, all right. So I know your story, and it didn't just, you had some issues along the way where, some moments where now, didn't you at one point so tell the story about when you're trying to get more product in, and then you woke up and you didn't own the company anymore.
Okay. Well, that was like, I survived that, we got the product, that 200,000 was out. And so, how, every investor thinks 20 grand, that's more money than I'll ever need, right? Well, because of our growth and we were so production oriented, I had to buy that investor out, with a profit and bring in a bigger investor. And then I had to buy that investor out with a profit and bring another one in. And so I finally got up to me getting these three guys from Anaheim, Neil, Paul, and Joe. And they decided to back me. And so we were going to own the company 25% each, which was actually a good deal for me at the time because they were going to handle all of the operations of the company, the purchasing, invoicing, financing, and warehouse. And I was going to be the outside sales rep. And by now I'd come to love sales. It wasn't even selling. Every season I'd go out and I'd be having fun with all the shop owners. I'd be playing golf or surfing. And so it was just a blast, But there was one proviso. I didn't actually get my stock certificate issued until I finished up this little trademark lawsuit that was a company UGHS that I was fighting, and I knew I'd beat them. So I went on the road with them, and the very first day, I fixed up the warehouse for them and everything. And the very first day I went out on the road, I went down to Huntington Beach, Huntington Surf and Sport, and I walked in the door, and the owner goes, "Hey, Brian, I heard you sold the business." And I went, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, I called an order in this morning, and the guy said you don't own the business anymore." I said, "Bullshit, you're telling me?" They said that? And I couldn't wait to get out of there. And I went to the Shell gas station next door because this was before cell phones, and I called up Anaheim. I go, "Neil, what the heck are you telling people?" And he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you're telling them I don't own the company." He says, "Well, you don't. You don't get your 25%. And I just hung the phone up, and I drove back to San Diego, and I looked at the contract that we did, and I just went, "Oh, shit. I don't own the company." And I just went into this horrible depression. And like for 3 days, I didn't leave the house. I didn't speak to anyone except my wife. And it was like on about the third or fourth night, I was just lying on my back, right, on the floor, watching TV, and my wife was up on the couch, and the show finished. So I clicked the TV remote off, and I rolled over on my stomach and started crawling on my hands and knees to the bedroom. And my wife, she just looked at me, and she's a really quiet person. She just looked at me and says, "You get up now and walk to bed like a man," and she scared the shit out of me. But as I was coming up off the floor, I was like coming out of a fog. And I started to think, God, there's so much more to life than this crappy little sheepskin business. And that night I slept like a baby and woke up the next morning, and now I'm back to being Mr. Positive. And hey, I lost that business. Okay, what can I do? And I started meditating again. And I thought, okay, well, can I be in real estate? No. Business broker, maybe. Accountant, never. And then, man, I got this dash of goosebumps again. And I thought, sales. I've come to love sales, Right. And then I started thinking, okay, what can I sell? And that's when the big goosebumps hit me. And I'm going to segue real quick on that because everybody gets goosebumps. I even ask audiences, put your hand up if you get goosebumps. Everybody does, right? So what I've come to believe is that, God isn't way out there in the end of the universe somewhere. There's a fragment of God in every single one of us. And it has some message or some plan for our lives, right? And every time we make a decision that's in alignment with those plans, it sends a little message to us. And the only way it can get through is through this electrochemical body we have, and it comes out in the form of goosebumps, So I want to challenge you and all your watchers here that next time you get the goosebumps, just stop for a second and just try and think, what did I just think or what did I just do? And I'll bet you it'll be something that's pretty monumental in your ongoing life or a change to your life, because it's always happened every time before a really big change. I've got the goosebumps, So anyway, why did I get the goosebumps? I'm going to sell Ugg boots. So I called up Anaheim and I told him, look, I may never own this company, but I'm going to make damn sure I get a pair of Ugg boots on every single person in America. And so I went back out on the road, and I got back after the first month, and I Neil handed me an envelope, and I opened it up. It's a check for $5,000. And he says, that's your commissions for the month. And I went, shit, that's the first money I've ever pulled out of this business in like 6 years. And I went back on the road the next month, and again, I'm having fun. I'm not even working. And I get back, there's a check for $10,000, and the next month, another check for $10,000, and that made me come up with another bit of philosophy. I'm going to hold the book up again, because all these gems. I'm only going to tell you a few today, but it's full of these little gems. But the theme from that experience was that nearly always your most disappointing disappointments will always become your greatest blessings, right? Your most disappointing disappointments will become your greatest blessings. And I remember speaking on a stage in Palm Springs a year ago, and it was the Inc. 5000 group, right? And these are all the fastest growing companies in America. And I remember, asking the question, raise your hands if in the last year something happened in your business or your personal life that at the time was an absolute disaster, and now you look back and you think, thank God that happened, right?
Right.
I swear, 80% of the people put their hands up. And every audience I asked that to, I'd say 60 to 80% of people put their hands up. And it's such a thing, a true thing of life. And I'm sure you've experienced the same things, how great things have come out of what looked like seeming disasters.
That's why I do Inner Edison. That's what it's all about. Our greatest accomplishments come from our greatest defeats, usually.
They sure do. Yeah.
All right. So you were talking about how you increased your sales and all that, right? And you're doing that part, and then you transcribe. You went over to your little fable, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So you kept building the company, and then so what? How did you get the company back?
Well, I was so good on the road, and in that the next 3 year period, Neil bought Joe and Paul out, so he owned the company 100% now, and he was super impressed. He was pretty sort of standoffish at first, but I just came through on the road, and every Christmas I'd just come in and work in the warehouse for 2 weeks just to help with the backlog of sales. And after 3 years, he sort of called me up and said, "Hey Brian, come in next week. I'm going to get the lawyers in. I'm going to issue you 25% of your stock because you finished the lawsuit, and I really like working with you." And so between then and the next week, we bought new company cars for each other, and we got the life insurance broker in, and we got life insurance policies on each other, and so everything was just fine in my life. I was so happy. The sales were going great. I was making really good money, and now I'm going to get my share of the company back. And I was out at the weekend, and now I got a cell phone that looks like the size of a brick, with a cord down into the car.
Yeah, I remember those.
No, I was so cool having one of those, and my wife called me, and she was crying, and I go, Laura, what the hell's happening? And she goes, "Oh, Brian, Neil's just died." And my world just crashed. He'd been at a motocross race and had a massive heart attack during the race, and they couldn't revive him, at the hospital. So I called his widow up, and she'd never stepped foot inside the business. She had no idea what UGG was even, right? And so I told her, "Listen, I'll come up tomorrow, and we'll figure out, how to keep this thing alive and try and figure out where we're at." And because this was my livelihood, I was making really good money, and so I came up and I offered to work without pay for a year, and I just lived off commissions, and it was the hardest year of my life ever, without a doubt. I started off commuting 2.5 hours every morning and home at 2.5 hours every night, and that lasted about a week and a half, and I just said, screw this. So I started getting the train up to Anaheim every Monday from San Diego, and back on Friday nights. I always came home on Friday night with a chronic sore throat, and instead of playing with my kids, I was like recuperating all weekend, and this went on for probably 5 or 6 months, and it was like the best of times and the worst of times, because the best was that we just introduced these two new colors, gray and charcoal and black. And they were just kicking ass. Like we had 35 reps all over the country by now. And I'd been traveling out there with, I put up 1.5 million frequent flyer miles just traveling with reps, right? And so that part of it was going fantastic. But on the other side, I had my supplier, George, in Australia, and I'd call him up and say, George, the sales are going fantastic. I'm sending down an order for 5,000 pairs for production. And he'd say, well, how are you going to pay me? I said, George, don't worry about it. I'm going to raise the money and we'll finance the business and we're going to have a killer season, But the other downside was I'd written a business plan and I started shopping it around all the banks and they're all saying, oh, Brian, it's a fad. You won't be around next year. And this is like 7 years in, right? And I'm going, it's not a fad. Look at the back orders we've got. Oh, yeah, but that's just seasonal. You'll be gone next year. And so none of the bankers had talked to me. The investment bankers, they saw nothing happening for 6 months and then this huge spike for October, November, December, January, and then nothing. So they weren't interested and it was way too big for friends and family. So again, trying to pivot as an entrepreneur does, I thought, well, who would be happy that I stayed in business? And I thought, okay, my best retailers. And I called them all and they were not interested at all, But then I thought, well, on the other end of the chain, how about the suppliers, the tanneries that produce sheepskin? They would want to make sure that I kept in business to get product out. And so I sent a business plan to 3 or 4 tanneries in Australia. One guy called me and said, Brian, this is fantastic. Get on a plane right now. And so I did one big delivery to a COD customer to get the airfare, and I hot-footed it down to Melbourne. And, Gordon Jackson was the guy, Jackson's Tannery, and he showed me all around the tannery, and then we went back to his office, and on his desk is this plaque that says, I reserve the right to change my mind, and I know, what the shit is this? So anyway, we did all these forecasts and planning, and he was calling up his factory managers to see what the production volume could be if, the inventory of, raw skins that he had and all that. And then the next morning he comes in and goes, oh, Brian, I'm going to have to pull out, you're in LA and I'm here and this is a huge amount of money I'm about to invest and I just can't take the risk, with not knowing how to control you. And the next morning he comes in and, don't worry, Brian, I found an associate in Los Angeles. He's going to look in on you and check out on, all the books and everything. And then the next morning it was like, oh, Brian, this is a family company and all the family's not into it and they've outvoted me. So we're going to have to call it off, So I left without a deal, And as soon as I got back to San Diego, my sales rep, the California rep, said, hey, Brian, there's a company out here selling Ugg boots or sheepskin boots, and they say they're going to put Ugg out of business. And I go, oh, my God, who are they? And she said, well, it's a company called Thunderwear. So I got out the trade directory and looked up Thunderwear, and I went, shit, they're a windsurfing company. They sell wetsuits and gloves and booties. What the hell are they doing in sheepskin? And I just threw it away. I said, look, I got bigger problems than another competitor. So I was, now it's like June, July, and, I got back from Australia. Now it's August, and September is the big kickoff for the winter trade season, and it starts with a big trade show called Action Sports Retailer up in Long Beach. And I talked to my wife and said, if we go and write sales, we got no way to deliver product, but I don't want to give up yet. I think I'm going to go show up, put up the booth, which we did. And we brought in all last year's product and put it out on the tables and everything. And after we finished doing that, I said, I'm going to find those Thunderwear people. So I looked up the trade directory and they were way back near the toilets, So I start walking over and, one booth short, I just stopped dead. And there was all my charcoal and all the black and all the sand color, all the natural colors. And they had labels on the back that said Thugs, which is a combination of Thunderwear and Uggs, I thought it was rather appropriate. And And right then I just realized, oh shit, my supplier's done an end run around me. All the times I'd been in touch, sending him down orders, he was just accumulating product and getting another distributor. And so that's when I realized, shit, I'm out of business. But I couldn't tell anybody, my sales staff or anybody else, because, we just ran through the motions of the show. We wrote a record $250,000 sales, which we'd never, ever done before. And I knew we'd never send out a pair of boots. And because my wife and I had talked about calling everybody next Monday and, just telling them to go buy the thugs because it's our product anyway. And so we packed up the booth after 3 days on a Sunday night, and I drove back to San Diego, and I made a call to Gordon in Melbourne and said, hey, Gordon, look, I really want to thank you for all the help. We tried to get this together, but, George has done an end run around me, and we're just going to have to shut it down and figure out what to do next year. And he was sad, and we hung up. And 2:00 in the morning, the phone rings, and it's Gordon, and he says, Brian, screw George Bircher, I'll get you all the boots you need. And just like that, we were back in business, no contract, no handshake, no nothing. And the next day I sent all the patterns down to him, and he sent them out to be duplicated and sent out to 4 or 5 manufacturers, and he cranked his tannery up to massive production. We never got charcoal or black, but we got all the standard colors, and that was 80% of the business anyway. And so after 2 weeks, I started getting, I got 2,000 pairs on a Friday morning, the next Friday, 5,000 pairs. And then every week after that, 5,000 pairs every Friday. And, I'd keep half of it aside to ship to all of my customers across the US. And the other half was for the surf shops, right? The local guys. And they didn't even wait for UPS. They all drove down Friday morning, and they were lined up to get as many boots as they could. And I'm rationing them out to everyone. And so anyway, by Christmas, we threw away $1.5 million worth of orders because we started so late, we never got the product in. But, after Christmas Day, everything just stops dead in that warehouse. Like no one's calling, no one's doing refills. And between Christmas and New Year, it's like a really, really quiet period. And I can remember just sitting back thinking, that was the worst season ever, but thank God I got boots out with the UGG labels on them, right? And so 2 really weird things happened between Christmas and New Year, right? Number one, the life insurance policy paid out on Neil's life or death, and it was just enough to pay his widow, 100% value for all of the assets plus all the profits we just had for the year. And she was like so thankful to have dodged a huge bullet because she would have just had to wind it up and do nothing, would have got nothing. And so she was happy. And the other weird thing was that the customs broker screwed up and sent 2,000 pairs of my UGG boots up to Thunderwear and 5,000 pairs of thugs down to me. And man, I really wanted to destroy those boots, but I needed my 2,000 pairs way better. So I called him up and said, I'm going to drive up to San Clemente. It's only 30 minutes and we'll swap them out. So I did that. And then as I'm driving back home, down Camp Pendleton, it's a big area in between LA and San Diego that's like no development. And it's like every time I hit Camp Pendleton coming back from LA, I just go, whoa, thank God, it's a cruise into San Diego. And so I was driving along there and I'm thinking, man, how come we couldn't keep boots in the warehouse for 24 hours and the Thunderwear warehouse which was bigger than our warehouse, was floor to ceiling full of sheepskin boots. And that's when I realized, oh shit, the loyalty of my customers was so great that they threw away nearly $3 million worth of orders at retail rather than buy thugs, which they knew was a knockoff. And it really became a testament to all of those millions of miles I put in and how many retailers I visited all across the country. I mean, every single state, I knew the best retailers and had a personal relationship with them. And even my surf shop connections were even stronger. And they all decided to forego the extra sales rather than buy from Thunderware. And so that's a huge lesson to everybody who gets into business. The customers and customer service is the most critical. And now we're living in a world of websites and clicks and Amazon and instant shipping and everything like that. And many, many businesses just say that's the new world. But if you can reach out through the internet and do customer service and follow up on it, I'll tell you an example. I've got a client, like I mentor certain people who I really love the product and everything. And she's got this lamb leather shoulder bag, and she's been doing it 5 or 6 years. And she's right from the time she started out, every single bag went out with a little personalized note. And then 2 weeks later, they got a phone call. Hey, how do you like your bags? Everything. Well, now she's got this mailing list of 80, 90,000 people. And she's got a Sash sisterhood. The product brand is called Sash for Sash bag. And she's got the Sash sisterhood, which is about 8,000 women who are just totally into their bags, and they all talk with each other. And then we decided, okay, we're going to put on a Sash bash, and it's like, if you make your way to San Diego, we're going to have this huge party. And we rented out a big ballroom in a hotel, and like 350 women showed up from all across America and Canada just to be part of this thing. And they didn't know a single soul that they were going to be in the group with, but that's the sort of level of customer service you can develop online. She's 100% online, and you've got to be able to reach out through the internet and make a definite connection with your customers. And that's the longevity of your business. It's the livelihood of your business, is this ongoing repeat sales. Nearly every one of those 6,000 has 5 to 10 bags, So that's a testament to how important customer service is.
Yeah, and also building your brand, because you built a brand that I remember, because I was in that during that period of time down in San Diego,
right.
80s and 90s, and
right.
and there was not, and I remember the knockoffs, and people were like, "Those are knockoffs. I don't want those. I want Uggs. I want the real ones." Right?
I'll tell you a funny story about that. So we were predominantly in surf shops right through the mid 80s, and then suddenly when I ran those ads, it became like, Mom, I want a pair of Uggs for Christmas. All the cool guys at school got Ugg boots, So the moms, they start walking the malls, to Nordstrom and Kinney and Tom McCann and all these big shoe retailers say, hey, you got Uggs? And they go, what the hell are Uggs? So the mums don't know they're sold in surf shops, right? So they, would see these knockoffs in, these lower end shoe stores. And so they'd buy a pair of knockoffs. And then after Christmas, we would get like hundreds of calls from these moms saying, hey, I've got these, whatever they are, let's say thugs, for instance, and my kid won't wear them to school because he gets ridiculed because they're fake Uggs, And so even though the knockoff company sold a bunch at Christmas, they nearly all got returned because the UGG logo and the brand itself was so powerful that even the kids wouldn't wear the knockoff. So it's a testament to the brand, that's for sure.
My kids wouldn't wear the knockoff, so still to this day. So, it's a testament to what you built over time and how you tell people, because most people, your story, you're talking 20. How long ago was when you first started 41?
18 years. It's 40 years ago now, but it was 18 years that I had the business. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it takes a while to build a brand.
Absolutely.
We have things these days that help a lot more, like you talked about the internet and Amazon and certain things, but it also can hurt the brand at the same time.
Yeah. You put it in the wrong retailer, like, there were companies that, we only did this once, but we were at a trade show in Las Vegas, and this company wanted to buy a container of boots, like 3,000 pairs, to ship to Europe. And we were over the moon. Yeah, we start get Europe opened up, And so we did the deal. And then when it came to shipping, they said, well, it's the Port of Destiny, Long Beach. And I called him. I said, well, what the hell's going on? Oh, we have to bring it into Long Beach to, check the quality and everything. And then we send it to Europe, Well, the product arrives 3 weeks later. It's in all the Price Club, Costco, all the discount stores. These guys are called diverters, and it's a profession called diverters. And they lied to me, and all these 3,000 pairs showed up all over, Costco and everything. Luckily, they sold out in 2 or 3 days and were gone, right? And I had to handle calls from all my surf shops. Why the hell did you sell to Costco? So yeah, protecting the brand is a really big deal, and making sure your distribution is clean is a very, very important part of a business.
I think I need to have you back on where you can talk about protecting a brand.
Oh, I'd love to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, because today was your story and how the time it takes to build your brand, and the things along the way that you think are going to kill or destroy you, which actually makes you better, and you learn from it, and you're stronger going forward.
No, right? I could talk branding. I mean, I went to UCLA when I first got here and did a couple of units in marketing, and branding is like my passion. And I could talk for another hour on branding, because it's not your trademark, and it's not your logo, and it's not the product. It's a whole other animal, which I'll talk about at another time.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back on for that, because that's a totally, just focus on branding and what you can do to build that brand.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to leave us with today?
That's pretty good for a wrap up for now. Let's just pick it up again sometime. I'd love that.
Yeah, so I'll send the thing out to you and get you back on.
Okay.
But Brian, I really appreciate you being on Inner Edison today. Thank you for sharing your story, and we are definitely going to have you back to talk about branding.
Way to go, Ed. Thanks, everybody.
All right.